So I just want to move on to MRI technique. I think MRI is one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century, really. It's allowed us to see things that we were never able to see before. In terms of total time and the history of medicine, it comes right on the heels of CAT scanning, but it's a quantum leap by itself. All right, so let's get into MRI. The physics of it are quite a miracle. So what is MRI? How does it work? All right, so let's get into this slide a little bit. So we have omega sub p equals delta theta divided by delta t. So that actually is a precession angular velocity. Do you guys want to skip this slide?
We know.
Just think about the thing I wanted to show actually was this top, all right? So just keep in mind the idea of a top. So this is the guts of an MRI scanner. There is a tube, and there's actually, I like these, the two tubes coming in and out of it shows that there's actually liquid nitrogen that has to cool 5 miles of copper wire. So that's why MRIs are so expensive, because copper is very, very expensive. It has to cool that because there's current running through this wire constantly. And so it needs to be super cooled because it gets superheated. What it does is it creates a magnetic field that is in one direction. It's through the bore of the MRI machine. So this is the top, okay? And each proton, H2O, right? Each hydrogen is a proton, and it's a tiny little top. We're 70% water, right? So all these little tops are spinning inside of you. What the main magnetic field does is it aligns those little tops in one direction. Very briefly, what it does is it takes all these little tops and knocks them over. And then as they go back to the original position, as you can see here, back into that z-axis as they're returning, there's a snapshot that's taken. And depending on where that proton, where that little top is at that precise moment, we can kind of tell where that water molecule is. Is it in the gray matter of the brain? Is it in fat? Is it in bone? So we're actually, an MRI is actually a water picture. It's just a picture of water. And it tells something about the milieu, about the environment that it's in. So here's the, again, if you think about that, those 5 miles of copper wire, it's all in this machine here. Okay, and then the patient goes through the bore. And we take an image, and this is the reflective image of this kind of anatomic display there. Okay? What are the advantages of MRI? All right, there's superior contrast resolution. As I showed you before with the CT scan, that was a very subtle finding in the middle of the brain. That would kind of jump out at you on an MRI. It's multiplanar. CT scans are all obtained axially. Okay? This is the axial plane. Multiplanar means that we can basically choose whatever plane we want to image in. And there's no ionizing radiation. It's been in the news recently, you know, patients getting too much dose of radiation because of CAT scans. There's no ionizing radiation for MRI. What are the disadvantages of MRI? Higher costs. Like I said, there's liquid nitrogen that's expensive. There's, you know, the copper wire that's very expensive. So therefore it's lower in availability. For example, we have only one magnet that's inside this hospital. There's a trailer that we bring in for 3 days a week just to improve our throughput. It's a longer study. Okay, so whereas a CAT scan machine, you can put 40, 50 patients through the CAT scanner in a day. We don't do quite that many, but you could. Really, the maximum of an MRI is around 20 patients in one day, and that's working, 16 hours out of a 24-hour day. The real drawback for me is that when you have a longer study, sometimes patients can't tolerate it. So eventually they're going to start moving. And as I described, the more advanced techniques, it's a longer and longer study, and then you have contrast, and pretty soon it's an hour and 30-minute examination.